Hey y'all, hope you're doing well. My name's Dave. I'm a senior in the class of 2021 at Walter Johnson High School in North Bethesda, Maryland. And today I'm going to be walking you through both the Montgomery County and the Maryland state processes for developing their budgets. Starting with Montgomery County. So the relationship between the executive and the legislature in this process. So the county council is the final spending authority for the county government and all county and by-county agencies. So, Montgomery County Public Schools, Montgomery College, the Montgomery County Planning Board, things like that. All of the things in the county that need money, the county council is the ones who decide how much they get. But it's the county executive who makes the original recommendations for the capital and operating budgets. They submit plans for these as well as for individual agency budgets. But the council then, once they receive this plan, they have full authority to add to, delete from, increase, or decrease any appropriation item. In other words, they get a recommendation from the county executive and they do whatever they please with it. And so their official goal is they want to ensure that the budget balances the needs of their residents in a fiscally responsible manner. So we only have so much money. We have a lot of money. I'll show you that later compared to other counties. But we only have so much money. And a lot of people need a lot of things. And so we have to figure out where we want to send that money. So the process about this. So at first, the county executive submits a plan every year for the annual fiscal year, and a 6-year plan every 2 years to the county council for both the capital and the operating budget. The capital budgets are due by January 15th. The operating budgets are due March 15th. And a capital budget, the difference between them, a capital budget is your infrastructure projects and your spending on development in the county, where an operating budget is like paying employees and things like that. So an operating budget is making sure things run, and then a capital budget is construction and repair and maintenance and whatnot. So when you make the annual plans, they have to be consistent with the 6-year plans that you're working on. The council is allowed to take on debt. They can only take debt that they would have to repay within a year for operating expenses, but for anything like capital expenses, they can have up to 30 years for the debt to pay off the debt. So the executive submits these plans. Once they're submitted, they have to wait 3 weeks before you can start having public hearings on them to make sure that the public can go look at the bills. And then so they have work sessions on them with the public, and they have several meetings where they debate on these. And there's a couple of things that happen. So if there's an increase in the total operating budget from the previous year that is more than the Washington-Baltimore Consumer Price Index rises, so like a disproportionate increase, it requires 6 votes, which will be a 7 once the council expands, which is a 3/5 majority. And then if they break from the spending affordability guidelines that they adopted at the start of the year, then it needs 7 votes, which will soon be 8, which is a very big supermajority. That very few things in the council ever pass by this. So after they have all these work sessions, the council approves the budget, and it goes back to the executive, and the executive could disprove or reduce any item in the budget, but then it comes back to the council, who can overturn that veto. And eventually we pass the budget. Outside of the budget, so the county executive can recommend supplemental appropriations outside of the budget, which if it's just for the purpose of like a law that we created that needs more money, then it just requires a simple majority. But other supplemental funds are going to require that 3/5 margin. And after the council does haggle and pass their supplemental appropriations, the executive can veto them again, but then the council could override it. So special appropriations are going to be passed when we have like an emergency situation come up. These are again going to need that 3/5 threshold. And these are kind of rushed through the same as expedited legislation, which is why it can actually pass without public comment. A press release has to be put out, but otherwise it can be like really rammed through very quickly. So again, after the budget's adopted, the executive has the power to redistribute like the funds we haven't spent yet within departments, and the council can redistribute funds between departments, but only up to 10% of the original appropriation for any one specific department can be redistributed. And then the council passed a law we have a centralized system to purchase all of our county goods and services, which the chief administrative officer supervises. And then at the end of the year, a certified public accountant who's not a county employee is going to independently audit every single thing that we did in the county. and all of our fiscal documents are public record. And so you can really get a good look at what's happening with our money in the county with your tax dollars. So this is our operating budget. It's $5.8 billion. It pays for about 37,000 full-time employees. As you can see, almost half of it's going to go to Montgomery County Public Schools, and then about 10% is going to the police, 7.5% to the debt service, and so forth and so on. You can read down that. There's a link at the website, link at the end of this presentation to our website, which is very good website. And our capital budget is about $14 billion for our projects. We do over 500 projects in this 6-year plan. And so at the end, about a quarter is going to Montgomery County Public Schools, about a quarter is going to transportation, a fifth is going to our sanitary services, and then on to government, Montgomery College, so forth and so on. So here's our comparison of Montgomery County against other states, against other counties in the state. And you can see Montgomery County, we have the biggest budget, and then Prince George's is not far behind us, and then everybody else is way behind that. Obviously, again, Howard and Baltimore counties, which are in the DC Baltimore areas, have more money, and so they've got bigger budgets. And then as you get out to more rural areas along the Eastern Shore, the Western Panhandle, obviously there's a lot less money to go around. So Montgomery County really does have a lot of money, and they do spend more per capita as well than any other county in the state, I believe. I made a map on that, but I don't think I have it in this presentation. But if you'd like, I can email it to you, davetalkslocalpolitics@gmail.com. Okay, so Maryland as a whole, the General Assembly's budget development process. So again, our relationship between the executive and the legislature. So Maryland as a state has a very strong executive. And as of right now, until it changes, this budget development process is a really big, good example of it. Because the governor formulates the whole budget, detailing all of our expected state expenses, and they send it to the General Assembly. And then currently the General Assembly has no power to increase or change appropriation between departments. They can restrict certain items within the budget, but they cannot move things around or add to it. I'll explain in a sec how this is changing. But to counteract this, so the legislature, once they pass the budget, which is mostly at the governor's discretion, it gets passed without the governor's signature, so it can't actually be vetoed. But how this is changing. So in the 2020 election, with about 75% support, we authorized ballot question A, which was a constitutional amendment. So now the General Assembly has the power to increase, decrease, or add items to the state budget, as long as it doesn't exceed the total proposed budget submitted by the governor. So basically what this means is, within any department, we can add money, we can take away money. We just cannot overshoot the total amount of money that the governor says we should be spending in a year. But to check this newfound power for the legislature, the governor gets to have a line item veto, which means they can remove any one individual item from the bill that they don't like. But the General Assembly, obviously with the 3/5 majority, has the ability to overturn this. So this goes into effect for the 2023 session for our fiscal year 2024 budget. So the process of developing the budget starts about 15 months before the fiscal year starts, which the fiscal year starts on July 1st. And our Department of Budget and Management, they make a set of instructions for all of our state agencies to formulate their budgets, and sets up a maximum request ceiling for all of them. And then on a staggered schedule throughout the fall, agencies are going to deliver their requests to the Department of Budget and Management. And they have workarounds to surpass their request ceiling or to ask for more money than they actually need to operate, which obviously, the department will take into account, and they'll make recommendations to the governor on it. And then in mid-December, the Board of Revenue estimates how much available revenue there is to put into the budget. And the legislature's Spending Affordability Committee convenes, even though that's before the legislature comes into session. So both of those groups are going to make recommendations. And then the governor makes a final determination on how much money we're including in the budget bill. We call this amount the governor's allowance. This is that amount of money that now the legislature is not going to be able to go over. So the budget is presented to the General Assembly in early January, and it has to be a balanced budget. We are not allowed to take on debt. So we have to have exactly the same amount of revenue raised as is spent. And so in this really long bill, we have appropriations for all of our agencies by their fund source. We have appropriations to provide for deficiencies in the current fiscal year that we're still in when the session meets by fund source. We have specific salary information. We have a bunch of other general information. It's a very long bill. And so after the governor submits the bill, but before final action is taken on it, the governor can make amendments through supplemental budgets, which the legislature would have to agree to use. Usually they will. And this could happen for any number of reasons. Often it's some sort of oversight because there was a massive thing in the bill. Maybe something new came up. But regardless, it's usually going to get taken up. But the legislature does have to vote on it. Okay, so once the bill's in the chambers, it goes through several levels of processing. So it goes to a subcommittee for review, and then it goes to a full committee for more review, and then it passes out of committee. It goes onto the floor, and then it goes to the other chamber, and then finally both chambers come together for a conference committee, and they pass it. And it passes without the signature of the governor, which means they can't veto it. Again, this is changing for fiscal year 24. It has to be enacted by the 83rd day of the session. But if it hasn't been, the governor will extend session as long as necessary, which is the only time the governor can really extend the session. They could call back session at other times, which is a little weird. The legislature can increase spending into the current budget through a supplemental appropriation bill, but this can be vetoed. And when they do this, they have to raise a specific tax for a specific purpose in that bill. They don't just have access to a general fund that they could say, okay, we're going to spend more money on an infrastructure project in Charles County. They have to, tax somebody specifically in order to make that money. And so if the budget that we need, like if the capital and operating budgets that we have planned out don't have enough revenue coming, the legislature and the governor are going to have to come together and pass a reconciliation act in order to meet this, which has become common in recent years. And it's not subject to these specific budget rules, all of the crazy, weird things that apply to this law, like the governor not getting to sign it. And then finally, final legislative action establishes the legislative appropriation for each program within the budget. And so now all of our agencies get funded. And obviously the treasurer and the comptroller are going to work together to get this money actually out to them. So after it's adopted, during the year, the governor can alter appropriations with some very strict rules. So they can only transfer funds between agencies if they have special legal authorization, or they could transfer funds away from the contingent fund of the Board of Public Works. The total amount of appropriations cannot be increased. If there's revenue available, education funding can be increased. If it's over $100,000 of increase, then the legislature can review it. The Board of Public Works can create up to 100 new positions during the fiscal year that were not included when the last budget bill was passed. And through the Board of Public Works, the governor could reduce any agency's budget by up to 25%, except for any agencies in education, the debt service, legislation, judiciary, or salaries of constitutional officers. There are some services in Maryland that do not receive funding from the budget, like the Maryland Department of Transportation, the Maryland Environmental Service. They have to fund themselves. And all the fiscal reports that they put out are for educational purposes only. They're not audited by the state in the same way. And finally, after we've passed this bill and we've run through our year, at the very end of the year, we have closeout. All of our appropriations are marked in the books as either expended, which is we spent the money, encumbered, which is we took it on, but we didn't quite follow through, or canceled, which is we didn't spend it at all. So here's a look at our budget for fiscal year 2021. It's $43.8 billion. The most funding is going to health, and then elementary and secondary education, then higher education, then transportation, so forth and so on. And here's a list of the places you could look at. Obviously, the process for developing a budget, it's very long and twisted and convoluted and confusing. So I hope I've given you a pretty good understanding of what happens. Again, if you have other questions, send me an email, davetalkslocalpolitics@gmail.com. I'll try to get back to you. Continue on down this playlist if you want to hear more about Montgomery County and Maryland's governments. And beyond that, I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for watching.